You would have watched my video, no doubt, on the Dan's Land Cruiser 200. If you haven't, it's worthwhile going back and watching that before you watch this video, because this is kind of a bit of a continuation on that video. Now, towards the end of that video, you would have seen the test that we did when we ran his 1550 watt air fryer. That was a huge surprise there. Because we ran his 1550 watt air fryer in his Kedron caravan, same 12 240 volt setup, Victron gear as mine, except in his caravan, Dan's got the 12 3120 Victron Multi Plus, whereas in my vehicle I've got the 12 2080 Multi Plus. Okay, so it's a 2000 VA, which means it's got a 1600 watt inverter. The one in Dan's caravan, a 3000 VA, which converts to 2400 watt inverter. And the only other difference is the battery. He's got the Powerpaul Australia Scout 280 amp with a Daly 250 amp BMS in it. We ran some tests on there on his 1550 watt, and it came up with about, the battery was still on 13.1 volts. It was drawing about 135 amps, 130 to 135 amps out of his system to run that 1550 watt air fryer. So I thought, that's interesting. I've got a 1550 watt air fryer at home, exactly the same power consumption as Dan's. And I said, when I run it, I can't run it on my system because my battery has got not enough continuous discharge to run it, because it overheats. I've tried in the past and it overheats. And the problem is, if it overheats too much, then the BMS will shut down on your Itechworld 120X battery. I only ran it for a short period, and it's normally 158, 160, sometimes I've seen as high as 170 amps draw. So I switched it off. So the only way for me to run my bigger air fryer is if I also use my Honda generator and use the power assist feature on the inverter. Now the inverter will run that air fryer no problems at all. In regards to inverter, as I mentioned, I've got the 12 2080, which is a 12 volt 2000 VA, which is 1600 watt inverter, and the 80 stands for, it's a 80 amp electric charger. Although it'll charge up to 80 amps, but I can program it to charge at a maximum 50 amps like I have right now on here, because that's the recommended maximum charge rate for the Itechworld 120X battery is 50 amps. And Dan asked me, do you have the air fryer in the car? And unfortunately I didn't have it with me. I only ever take it with me if I go somewhere that's quiet and I'm base camped somewhere for a while, and I can take my generator and then I'll take it with me. Otherwise, I usually just take this little 1000 watt air fryer, which runs off it, no problems at all. But I've never really taken much notice of what the volts are on the battery. But then I said to Dan, well, hang on, 1550 watt, well, that's the same as mine. Let's try it on my vehicle, because I want to see what it produces on my vehicle. So you can remember, on the Kedron caravan, all right, spit and image, everything's exactly the same, except he's got the 2400 inverter in his Multi Plus, and I've got a 1600 watt inverter on me Multi Plus. Okay, so both Multi Pluses. And the other only difference, I've got the Itechworld 120X battery. It's got the Powerpaul Australia Scout 280 amp battery. Okay, 12 volt battery, right? 280 amps, the capacity of the battery. How awesome is that? 280 amps. That would go so well in this vehicle, wouldn't it? And I had no problems running my big air fryer then. I don't think I'd even need to carry a solar panel with me with something like that. I'm pretty sure I would not need a solar panel. So we brought it over, we plugged it in here, and I was getting really excited. I was really keen to see what numbers this draw. Turned it on, 160 amps. 158 to 160 amps. And the battery voltage, I noticed, dropped down to 12.2 if I remember right. That's right, it was 12.2. It was about 12.23 if you want to be exact. I remember now, it was 12.23. Now when we ran this test on his Kedron Caravan, the battery voltage was 13.1. So 13.1. So it still had almost extra 1 volt. And that's why the consumption coming out of the battery, the amperage draw out of the battery, was only around 130 amps out of his Caravan, and it was about 160 on this, because of that 1 volt battery difference. So interesting. So then I thought, you know what would be really interesting test, Dan? Said, yeah, it's that. Let's try your 1550 watt air fryer in your Land Cruiser 200. Remember, the Land Cruiser 200 has got the spitting image exactly what is inside here. He uses the same components. Everything's the same. And he even uses the Egon DC hub. So we took it over to Dan's vehicle. What we'll just explain then is all on video on Dan's Land Cruiser 200, putting the Victron to test. If you'll search for the thumbnail, it's got a big 370 amp discharge with a question mark. So go watch that. But this bit of information I got now, so unfortunately I was not able to film. So we got the 1550 amp, 1550 watt, which is a Ninja air fryer. Plugged it in his vehicle. Remember, exact same setup as mine. The only difference is he's got the Scout 280 amp hour 12 volt battery with a continuous discharge of 250 amps, and I've got the Itechworld 120X battery. That is the only difference. So we plugged it in, turned it on, and his voltage, now remember my voltage was 12.23, and when we ran the test on his voltage only came down to about 12.85. This is the info that Dan sent to me. I can hit the play button, and there we go, we hit the play button. That is what, so you can see the battery voltage 12.84, drawing 147 amps. Alright, you can see the difference there. Okay, just watch that, 12.87, consistent 12.87. It held that consistently. And 147 amps. So the same one, the same air fryer, with the exact same setup as mine. The only difference is the battery. Okay, both 12 volt batteries. And you can see how much less effort it took to power that, to make those AC volts. And the big thing is there is that voltage. His was running 12.87, mine is 12.23. Hence why mine was using more amps to produce the same energy, because the lower the volts are, the more energy it's going to take to make that same AC energy. That's why you'll see some setups now that are 48 volts, particularly in the yachting industry. You'll find majority of them are using your Victron gear and they got 48 volt systems. Because now let's say, for example, mine is 160 amps. If I got a 24 volt system, that'll drop it down to 80 amps draw. If I've got a 48 volt system, that'll drop it down to 40 amps. So you can see the higher the voltage, the less the amps are that it requires to produce that energy. The lower the voltage, the more amps that it requires to produce the energy. It's the Itechworld 120X. It's nowhere near the quality of the 12 volt Scout 280 amp battery. And to be hindsight, guys, the price difference will reflect that. Although, if you purchase one of these at recommended retail price, there's not that much of a price difference. Alright, recommended retail price on these is way overpriced. They're not up to the task for what I want to do. They're not up to the task. So that's really interesting. So for those who are watching that video, you watch right through to the end. We kind of suspected it was to do with the batteries and the internals of the batteries, which appears that's to be the case. So remember, it's exactly the same setup that I've got in here. I may have an opportunity to test 3 lithium batteries soon, very soon, and I'm going to test them in this vehicle. And this one's going to be one. The one will be included in the test, and I've got another 2 batteries for testing purposes that I'm going to run tests and compared and run different loads on, and I'm going to record the figures, and that's going to make a really interesting video. So hopefully it won't be too far away. Right, now I asked Dan the other day if he could find something that's around 1,000 watt load to run on in his Land Cruiser 200, remember, with the exact same setup that I've got in my vehicle. And he looked around, and the best he could find was something that was 850 watts. Because I want to see at what stage does the voltage start to drop considerably before it starts to really affect the efficiency in producing the 240 volts energy. We're going to start on it right now. We're about to start. So Dan sent me the info. So this is a 850 watt load on his system. So as you can see, take notice the voltage, 13.1 volts. Okay, constantly 13.1 volts, 63.5 amps, 835 watt load. I wish I could find something that's 850 watt load, and I could have tested it exactly. But unfortunately, the closest I could find right now is me 1,000 watt in air fryer. So it's not a perfect test, but it's going to give you some ideas. But it's still, I'm curious to see what the voltage is at 1,000. Let's turn this on. So we're going to put 1,000 watt load in this now and see what sort of energy, what the voltage is. Right now the voltage is on 13.2. So here we go. 200 degrees Celsius, and we're going on. Okay. Voltage is now 12.6 volts. So we've got 12.6 volts, 96 amps coming out of the battery. Okay, so here we are, 12.55 volts, 12.54. It's actually going down. 12.53, interesting. It's actually going down. 12.52. So that's interesting, because on Dan's system it's sustained. Once it got those voltages, it sustained those voltages. It never went down. And now we're down to 12.5 volts. So it's actually going down. The battery temperature is still at 26 degrees Celsius, as there's no major heat issues there as yet. It's gone up to 27 degrees Celsius. We've got a load on it about 94.8 amps. And now it's 12.49. So you could roughly say 12.5 volts with a 1000 watt load on that battery. So if you're watching this, Dan, if you can find something that's rated at 1000 watts, I'd love to see what the specs are on that load of 1000 watts. I remember he did send me one with the 850 watts, and you saw what the figures were then. It had, what's it, 13.1 volts, and was it 65 amps, thereabouts. So add an extra 150 to that and it'll be really interesting to see. So we're now at 12.48 volts and minus 94. So we're looking at 12.48 volts there. And I see the battery's at 32 degrees Celsius. It's starting to climb. Now when I was running the 1550 watt load on this, the battery voltage was down to 12.23. Remember that, 12.23. 1550 watt load on Dan's Land Cruiser 200, the voltage was, what was about 12.9, thereabouts. So big difference, and that's where the big energy draw difference is. Now when he builds these batteries, he uses very thick components that will handle a lot more amps than what it's rated at. Watch that video that I filmed on Dan's Land Cruiser 200 with the discharge test and his Kedron caravan, and check that out, because we put a huge load on his caravan with the same Scout battery. Okay, the Scout 280 amp 12 volt battery. We put a 370 amp load on it, discharge load, and the battery voltage dropped down to about 12.25, which is about the same what this one drops down to at 1550 watts. Now it took a 4500 watt load before Dan's battery dropped down to 12.2. That's 4500 watts load before it dropped down. Repeat that again, 4500 watts, guys, before it dropped down to 12.2 volts. This one only took 1500 watts to drop it down to 12.2. So there's a big difference. Yeah, Powerpaul's battery is a 280 amp capacity, but that shouldn't make any difference, guys. That shouldn't make the difference. It's all to do with the internals. How thick are the cables? How thick are the wires? What's the BMS that's installed? Etc. How good are the cells? Are the cells second-hand reconditioned? Are they just second-hand? Are they brand new? Are they prismatic cells? It all depends on that. Itechworld do their best to hide what's inside their battery. Paul has no problems whatsoever in telling you what's exactly inside his batteries. In fact, if you go to Powerpaul Australia Facebook page, it's the only way you can contact him too, by the way, guys. If you want to buy one of these batteries, the only way to purchase one is to go through Paul's Facebook page. So it's Powerpaul Australia. If you do a search on that, you'll come up there and it'll be all the prices there. Now he's got two type of batteries he makes. He's got one that's called a Mercury that uses similar cells to what they use on the really high expensive Victron batteries, such as his 330. Paul told me that the cells he's using in his 330 amp 12 volt Mercury battery is the same cells used in the Victron batteries worth $5,700 plus. Paul's batteries are a lot cheaper than the Victron equivalent. But on top of that, remember, on top of that, with the Victron battery, it does not come with a BMS. And the BMS they recommend with that battery is worth $1,700. If you want a 330 amp for Victron, by the time you get by the battery, $5,700, add another $1,700 on top of that for the BMS. Whereas with Powerpaul Australia, you can purchase pretty much the same battery, similar to the Victron one, for a much cheaper price. And it's manufactured here. Oh, I still had this left on. There you go. And it's manufactured here in Australia, down in Melbourne. So well worth checking out. So guys, thanks for watching this video. If you watched it right through the end, thank you very much. Now this is not the end of it. I'm going to be putting more tests on it. If I can find something that's got an 850 watt load, but better off, because I used to regularly run this, alright, and I still will. I will still, if I'm going somewhere camping and I'm not using power, then I will still take this, because this thing is brilliant for cooking your meat pies, sausage rolls, etc. It is awesome. It's so quick, it's so handy, no major washing up to do, and just brilliant. I mean, chuck some party pies in there, 20 minutes later they're cooked, even if they're frozen. Little sausage rolls, whack in there. Some chips, put some chips in there, 20-25 minutes later they're cooked. And it's only small, as you can see, but I tell you what, it still gives you a decent feed. Big enough for me, and it's so compact. And this thing here, hang on, I'll unplug it and show you. This only cost me $50. This is what I've been putting to the test. That's only cost me $50, and I've owned this for over a year and never had a problem with it. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. For $50. How awesome is that? So guys, I'm getting really thirsty. I really need a drink. In fact, let's grab a drink. Today's choice of drink, once again, another one of these Bundaberg brewed drinks, sarsaparilla. Now, let's see if the cap opens. Oh, cool, awesome. I've got one that actually works. Guys, probably 2 out of every 4 or 5 I buy of these, you can't pull the caps off them. Excuse me while I sip this up. Oh, that's better. Oh boy. It's that time of the year where the weather goes stupid. It's cold at night, warm during the day. It's not too bad here. You might notice I've got my hat on. I tell you what, touch that, you can feel the warmth on there, but my head feels relatively cool. There's quite a fair bit of heat coming from up there. And tell you what, I'm glad I got this ostrich wing awning, because if I had any of the other awnings that don't have the same quality thick canvas on it, I don't think I'll be filming under this right now. It will be like a sauna under here. So guys, any questions, like always, ask put a comment down below and I will answer every question that's asked. I answer. I make an attempt. Sometimes it might take me a day or two before I get back to them, but generally I get back to the questions within a few hours. Sometimes instantly if I'm happen to be on my laptop, or not laptop, if I happen to be on my tablet, my phone or computer and a question pops up, I'll answer it straight away. Otherwise it could be a day or two. So keep an eye out for more videos similar to this. This is going to be an ongoing continuation series on subjects similar to what we just filmed here today. So guys, any questions like I mean, comment down below. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Put a like on the video, it helps with the algorithm, which means that the more likes, the more comments you get, the more YouTube will share this video, the better off it is for me, and also the better off it is for you too, you guys too, because then the more videos I can produce on different items, etc. and so on. Because it all costs money. It all costs money, guys, to do all these tests and videos and so on. So, till next time, look after yourself, be kind to everyone, and cheers. Bye.